Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Almost Major, where we talk about the many major studios and the films they release. We are currently going through Lionsgate from 1998 to 2005. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Bryden Doyle.
Hello.
And Charlie Nash.
Hello.
And we have a super special guest. It's Laron Chapman. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Doing great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Me and Laron just started a podcast for a local indie theater in Oklahoma City. It's the Rodeo Cinema Podcast. The first episode is up, so go check that out. But Laron, give us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a freelance filmmaker in Oklahoma City. I'm a writer, director, producer, occasional actor, sometimes podcaster, a programmer for the Dead Center Film Festival, and a board member on Rodeo Cinemas for Rodeo Cinemas. So running the gamut of the things that I can do. I'm spread thin, but I love all of it. So, but yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Damn.
He's also the CEO of just all Cruel Intentions Discord. You have to go through him.
It's true. Cruel Intentions and Scream. Come to me. Let's talk about it.
When Scream 6 comes out, I can't form an opinion until I've talked to Laron about it.
I still haven't seen Scream 3 or Scream 5, and I don't know why.
3 is good, 5 is not, in my opinion. But
3 is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've heard 3 has Parker Posey, so that should be
Yes!
like, how have I not injected this into my eyeballs?
And she is the best part of it. She's the best part. Like, and people who don't like that movie still say, but Parker Posey, though.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, she chews it up.
I've seen 1 a ton of times. I've seen 2 a handful of times. 4 I didn't care for at the time, but maybe if I go back and watch it, I mean, it's been over 10 years. Jesus Christ.
The thing that I noticed going through all 4 before 5 is that the digital look of 4 is like disgusting looking after the film look of the first 3. Like, it has this weird overly lit sheen on it. It's just, yeah.
It looks sunny. It's a weird, I don't know what that choice was. It has a weird lens that makes it look like a soap opera almost. And I don't know what that choice was. Like, people getting murdered with like sunlight on and just felt weird, doesn't have the same dark tone that the first two, or even the third one had, so.
Yeah. Which I think one of the main things I liked about 5 was the kill that happens in the daytime.
Oh,
with the kid going in, taking a shower, and doing all that. Like, that was
legit.
That was good shit.
That was legit. We won't say who for the spoilers, but yes, someone dies in the daytime.
Wait, people die in the movie? Whoa.
A few people die. Just
oh my
a few.
God.
Oh, gosh.
I was at a wedding a couple weekends ago, and a few friends and I got a hotel room, and we just threw on like Lifetime and watched one of those shitty Lifetime Christmas movies. And at one point, we were taking some gummies, and we got so stoned at one point where we were just like, what time of day is this scene supposed to take place in? And we couldn't find out because the lighting was so bad. We were like, it could be 5 a.m. or 6 p.m. I have no idea. But like, people just don't take that sort of stuff into consideration anymore, and it's weird.
I know. I sound like such an old man, but I was like, yeah, most movies that are in digital, they just don't light them well, and they're just like, fuck it, we'll change it in post. It's fine.
Yeah,
so everything looks exactly the same.
Yeah. And then even movies that I think look great are controversial. Like, I think, the digital work that Michael Mann uses is great, but some people fucking hate it. I mean, Miami Vice, I think, is finally getting, a resurgence, a much needed resurgence. But like, I remember seeing it in theaters in 2007 or 6 whenever it came out, and people were like, I don't know what to do with this.
Okay, we're talking about Miami Vice from 2005. No.
No.
We're talking about,
No.
Have there been podcasts that talked about Miami Vice before?
I don't think so. If we wanted to do a podcast about Michael Mann, we would be the only podcast. Right after that, I'm going to start my Quentin Tarantino podcast. I am a visionary. Today, we're talking about Mr. Death, The Rise and Fall of Fred LEUCHTER Jr. from 1999. It's premiered at TIFF in September 1999, and strangely, I'm going to go into this interview that I picked up, but Errol Morris said that it premiered at Sundance, and I found absolutely nothing about that. So
Yeah, no, I did see a couple of interviews. He revised it because he showed it at Harvard University, and what it was is it was originally just Fred Leuchter being interviewed to talk about this stuff, and then people started like saying that they believed Leuchter's theories in the movie, or there was a person like I think and there was also a person who said like that Errol Morris was like a Nazi even if he was Jewish, and that kind of thing. So like Morris was like saying, I need to go back and re-edit this movie to make it absolutely clear. I don't align with this guy's theories and everything. So that's why he added in like footage with like the historians who like actually did know what they were talking about and people like from Jewish associations. That was the stuff that got changed and revised from the Sundance version. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then
through the Harvard Film Archive too, which is great, by the way, if you're ever in the Boston area.
Yeah. Yeah, how did I uploaded it, but I also saw that it was on like AMC Plus, but I think like it's also not rentable or anything like that.
It's not rentable, no.
Yeah,
it was on AMC Plus here in Canada, which is too bad. Yeah, because it's weird too, because it's an independent film channel production, like it's IFC, and they have a lot of those things there. I don't know what was going on, but yeah.
I'm almost wondering if they're trying to keep it, and this is weird because it goes against what the movie's trying to do, but like if people are getting protective about this movie now because of like what I don't know, like I couldn't help but think about like, yeah, in 1999 this is understandably insane, but even more people openly talk and think about shit like this now. Like so I'm wondering like, like
I mean maybe, but also like something like American Movie wasn't streamable for like damn near a decade, so I think it's just a product of well, that's like Errol Morris's like 14th well-known movie. We're fine on that.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned, American Movie. There was an interview from the Chicago Tribune where they talked about how Mr. Death made the Academy Awards committee like first cut of like documentaries for like that category. Do you want to know what the other movies on the shortlist were?
Yes.
Armagosa, American Movie, which is what prompted me to mention that. Beyond the Mat, Buena Vista Social Club, which we talked about in our last series. Genghis Blues, On the Ropes, One Day in September, Pop and Me, Smoke and Mirrors, The Source, and Speaking in Strings. It did not make Mr. Death did not make the final cut though. I think it was Buena Vista Social Club that ended up winning the Academy Award.
Yeah, I think so.
American Movie should have won. But anyway,
still need to see it.
Oh my God, Charlie! Yeah, it's amazing.
It's on my list.
Yeah, we're doing that next week. Fuck Lionsgate. Opened LA and New York on December 29th, 1999. It ended up in 28 theaters. The budget, I could not find it, and a lot of documentaries, pretty hard to find the budget. Opening weekend of $24,125, domestic and overall gross of $507,000. Top 5 films that weekend: Stuart Little, Toy Story 2, Talented Mr. Ripley, Green Mile, and Any Given Sunday.
Green Mile, that's kind of an interesting symmetry almost. Like I haven't seen that movie, but it's like that's also about like
that was a big Christmas movie, but it is interesting
it's my favorite Christmas movie. So
it is interesting considering there is an absolutely horrific scene where a prison guard decides not to wetten the sponge that they're about to put on someone they're about to execute in an electric chair. And I watched it with my family as a teenager, and my parents were just like, "Oh shit, we completely forgot about like how fucked up this is." Like it's a really horrific sequence in what is otherwise like, not a cozy film by any means, but like one that's like very applicable for mainstream audiences during. I mean, I argue that if American Beauty didn't win Best Picture, that would have been like the runner-up.
Probably, because what is that? Sixth Sense, Cider House Rules, and what was the fifth one?
What was the fifth one?
Is The Insider nominated that year?
Insider, yeah.
Oh shit! Well,
it was probably Green Mile, but I don't think Green Mile won anything else that year.
I guess it didn't. No, maybe you're right. Maybe The Sixth Sense would have won. That would have been amazing, but I mean, it would have been better than American Beauty, or The Insider winning also would have been amazing. But
Toni Collette winning for Sixth Sense, that should have happened. But
that should have happened, and that was a stacked supporting actress year. You had Angelina Jolie won for Girl Interrupted, and then you also had Catherine Keener and Being John Malkovich and Chloe Sevigny in Boys Don't Cry. Oof. It's like,
yeah,
they usually don't get it, huh?
Yeah, rough. Yeah, that's a rough. Yeah, that's a rough lineup, but I mean,
yeah,
heavy hitting dramas like so.
Yeah.
Number one song in the U.S. this week, we will never stop talking about this, is Smooth by Santana featuring Rob Thomas. Number one song in Canada this week is Blue Dappa D by Eiffel 65. I believe Canada wins.
I had that album. I had the whole album.
I did too.
I don't remember any other songs on there other than there was one called like Living in a Bubble, I think.
Yes. That was peak buying an album for one song.
We
Mr.
listened
Death.
to that album in gym class, weirdly.
Of course you did. Of course you did. It reminds me of the time I brought Little Romeo's first album to gym class and they played that. Anyways, Mr. Death is a cinematic portrait of the life and career of the infamous American execution device designer and Holocaust denier. This is directed by Errol Morris. Prior to this, Gates of Heaven in 1978, The Thin Blue Line in 1988, and Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control in 1997. I forgot to put after this, but The Fog of War in 2003. Tabloid in 2010, and he did a Donald Rumsfeld documentary not too long ago as well.
Didn't he also do one on Putin that wasn't supposed to be very good?
I thought that was Oliver
Or no,
Stone.
it was Steve Bannon. No, that
Bannon.
was Oliver Stone. It was Steve Bannon. I'm
Oliver
sorry,
Stone.
I'm getting my...
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he also, it's funny, he talks about, Morris talks about how he wants his movies to be seen in a theater with people, and he's now, like, had to, like, do some of his stuff on, like, streaming services, like Wormwood.
Like Showtime.
Like,
Yeah.
Wormwood was the one with, which had, like, reenactments with Pierce
Right.
Sarsgaard. That was on Netflix. I watched, like, the pilot, not the pilot, the first episode of that, and I was very sleepy during it. I probably should not have watched it at night, yeah.
Hasn't he only done that series in, like, one, like, narrative movie, and that's it?
I don't know. Like, so, what, are you talking about, like, in the last, like, few years? Like,
I mean, just in general.
I don't know. It's,
I think when I looked at it, I only saw, like, there was, like, one early 90s narrative movie, and then that,
Yes.
Skarsgård series.
Yes.
Which then just reminded me of Joe Berlinger being like, yeah, I'm going to make Blair Witch 2. God bless him. Trivia. Morris said in 1999 in a Bomb magazine interview that the interview sat around for years because nobody wanted to put money into it. It was considered too controversial, although it was filmed years ago, the interview with Fred sat on a shelf for a long, long time, even though I felt as it was one of the best and certainly one of the most interviews I had ever done. Fred's interview also almost became a part of Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, but Morris's wife said, whatever Hitler is, he is not a spice. And Morris said, when you add Hitler into it as an ingredient to anything, it becomes Hitler flavored. It would have destroyed Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control. Which, yeah. Because isn't that movie like, oh, there's one that's a lion tamer, and there's a guy that's this, and then it'd be like, this guy's a Holocaust denier.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
One of these things is not like the others.
You can't say his subjects aren't varied, though. I mean,
That's
Oh
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
All the states which bought one of Fred's lethal injection machines have stopped using them because they were too complicated. Morris showed...
I read that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, I read that too, and I'm like, ha ha. Like.
Bryden said about the rough cut already, and Morris was not fond of the film's title and wanted to name it Honeymoon in Auschwitz.
Ooh.
ooh,
I don't like that
sounds
title. Yeah.
That sounds a bit too much like Springtime for Hitler. It just doesn't. It's a little ugh.
cringe.
It
I
does
have one-
happen, but
Yeah, I have one bit of trivia that I couldn't even confirm through the credits, but I read through a critic's review, and when this movie opens, it's got like this lightning show, and basically I was like, oh, because I've lived in Massachusetts the majority of my life, and I've been to the Museum of Science a ton of times, and there's a lightning show that they do in the Museum of Science in Boston, and I was like, that looks a lot like the lightning show, and then I was like skimming reviews, and it was just like, oh, that was the Boston Museum of Science. Oh, no shit. So
That's nuts.
really cool. Yeah.
I would not want to go there. That's scary. Imagine going there inebriated. No,
I
thanks.
went there as a kid. I went there as a kid and plugged my ears because I loved it, but it was so fucking loud. Like, they also had, in the same floor, they had a thing called virtual volleyball, where, like, you just stand there and there would be a little fake volleyball, and you and your friends would get on opposite ends and just be like, boop, and it would, like, immediately, like, go in a crazy direction or something.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And Charlie, since you're in Massachusetts, was like Leuchter was a guy who went to Boston University, and was this a guy that you knew about like before learning about this movie.
I actually didn't, and I started to think like during the movie, I'm like, have I like bumped into this guy before just on my day to day?
Because he's still alive.
He's still alive. I mean, he could be going to a movie theater I'm working at. I don't know if I've seen him in a grocery store. I don't know. It was something that I did think. I was like, oh, another movie that we're covering that I had no idea took place in Boston. Like, yeah.
I think he was the guy who came up to the box office the other day and asked for a ticket for Babylon, but said one ticket for Baby Love.
Baby Love.
Baby love.
A friend of mine was telling me that after that happened, they saw an ad for Babylon, but it was spelling it out one letter at a time, like B-A-B-A-Y, and she was like, Baby Love.
I think about the Namasaki literally every single day of my life. That's my favorite thing.
So
ever.
good. It's so good.
You can't open up the telephone book and say gas and then chamber and then experts and out come 10 Fred Leuchters. No, there's nobody. Fred Leuchter was our only hope.
I don't think he's naive. I guess if the Godfather called you up and said, you got to do this job for me, you just do it without thinking about it?
He truly believed what he was doing was right. This guy, Joe, asked me if I knew what Fred did for a living. I said no, and he said he kills people. And that kind of surprised me until he explained exactly what he did. Which wasn't that he killed people, but he made things that killed people.
From Errol Morris, director of The Thin Blue Line and Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control, Mr. Death. Riveting, says Roger Ebert. Spectacular hails Newsday, and Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly calls Mr. Death a truly great film. Mr. Death, The Rise and Fall of Fred A. LEUCHTER Jr. Now playing rated PG-13.
Okay, let's see. Funny thing about this, I'll start off with initial thoughts is, you know, most of the documentaries we've done before, I really didn't have much to say. And I kind of felt that way after this. And I was like, could we just like maybe just do 20, 30 minutes at the end of Monsters Ball? But then the more that I've read about it, the more I've wanted to talk about it more. Yeah, like my initial thoughts is that like I was reading that Ball magazine interview, and Morris is talking about like he's talking about the documentary and also Fred, and he just basically says something like, why do people do bad things? Do they do bad things knowing they're bad, or do they convince themselves that the bad things they are doing is really good? And I think that's like this movie is like a just that on display for an hour and a half. It's like, even though Fred says he's not anti-Semitic, I will say, yeah, but someone from 5,000 feet can't tell the difference. And it's just like, he's just willfully uninformed, or maybe he just doesn't think critically, and that's what's scary. It's like, it's a lot scarier for somebody to be like, to think these ways and not think of it as hatred than somebody who's outwardly hatred, because those are the type of people that are very easily malleable. Because like it would confront us, it would comfort us to know that like people that do wrong things know they're doing wrong things because of clear and obvious choices. But Fred just never stopped to think about it and just went along with all of it. He like can't look inward or to outside sources, and like just because the motherfucker took some rocks and found there was no traces of cyanide, that it's all fake. And that just shows like a lack of critical thinking or even scientific thinking about the presence of cyanide after 50 years when the historian talks about it in the doc. But going back to the people convincing themselves they're doing good things, he makes these like death chairs to be more humane, but never questions like if death chairs are necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you ask him like, why do you make perfect electric chairs, he'd be like, well, to be more humane. But if you ask him, like, why did they need to be used? He'd be like, well, because the jails require them. It's just like, you're not getting it. It would be like this rabbit hole of layers convincing himself that what he does is just, and him being an upstanding citizen trying to make sure inmates are comfy before their brains are fried, kind of thing. This all ends with him feeling like he's being mistreated for his views and never thinking about how he could be at fault. And all he wanted was for people to like him. Fred would accept like any invitation to any party that would have him as a guest. And that reminds me of like any actor from like decades past that get involved in like MAGA shit. It's because it's a group that will take anybody. And even if you're a little bit famous, they will prop you up as a god. It's just like, oh, fuck. What's her name? She just died, so I'll be not as insensitive, but
Chrissy Alley.
Yeah, somebody like her, where it's just like hasn't been popular in 20 years, but they're involved in that, and people are just like, yeah, but Christy Alley's on her team. It's like, and
yeah, Fox used her as a prop a whole lot of times whenever they could get her.
Yeah, but yeah, very good doc detailing like a fascinating man that just doesn't know how to say no, and also. The man drinks 40 cups of coffee a day and smokes 6 packs of cigarettes. That's all you need to know.
And he's still alive, which gives me hope, because, Jesus Christ, I haven't been kind to my body recently, so... Oh my God.
Yeah, but it's not that.
Oh,
so
it's not that. Oh, good God. No, I messaged you guys, and I was just like, excuse me? As soon as I got to that.
And he said he's been drinking, like, coffee since he was 4. It's like, and I'm like thinking,
why?
like, I'm thinking, is it like baby sips that like you ask your dad like for a cup of coffee or something, and then, or is he like just downing like cappuccinos or whatever?
It's like it's like when you're a kid and you see your parent has like the tiny sliver of wine, and then you take a sip and you're like, ugh, why would anybody take that? And it's like, I'm assuming his parents were like, he'll hate it anyway, and then they're like, oh no, like, oh God, his coffee addiction's already starting at such a young age.
Well, we don't have to question if he was regular, you know. I mean, because my God, 40 cups.
Yeah,
I don't drink 40 cups of anything a day.
Yeah,
even water.
Exactly. Like,
no.
even if it was decaf, that would be insane. Like, that's just not normal.
Yeah,
I'm pretty like. I don't think Johnny Depp drinks that much booze every day, for fuck's sake. Like, we don't have to get into that.
I was watching some some Stanley Tucci cooking show about him going around Italy, and he said something about like, oh, it used to be like customary to like drink like a liter of wine a day or something like that. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it was like,
a liter of wine.
It was something like that. Yeah.
There's even a Futurama episode where Fry drinks so much coffee that he like breaks the space-time continuum. Like, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't 40 cups. Like.
It's just an obnoxious number. Like, even when he said it, I was like, he said 4, right? Or 14.
Yeah.
Or 14, I just misheard it. But then I was like, I rewound it, and it was like, no, he said 40. That doesn't seem possible.
Yeah,
but,
and then 6 packs of cigarettes a day. How is he still able to talk?
Yeah.
That's 120 cigarettes, dog.
Like, you've got Patty and Selma from The Simpsons beat. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I was talking with y'all, but like the scenes where it's the actual scenes of like him in the diner and the black and white stuff, I literally wrote down on my notes. I was like, this looks like Natural Born Killers. It was shot by Robbie Robertson, so that makes sense.
Robert Richardson.
Robbie Richardson, yeah.
Yeah, great DP. Love how nightmarish it looks whenever they show the execution stuff. Or the execution chairs, and like it's black and white. They got that whooshing music. It's like, ooh, so creepy.
I know. When we do our intermission about Natural Born Killers, it's going to be awesome. But Laron, as our guest, initial thoughts?
Well, what struck me is like how calm and I won't say calculated, but maybe detached that he is throughout the whole process. Like, initially he comes off, it seems very legitimate. Like, I was like, you know, as he's like deconstructing the manufacture of these things and how, you know, he's like, okay, this guy seems like, you know, he's doing a really good service, you know, like, I mean, I'm vehemently opposed to the death penalty, but at least there was somebody out there, you know, attempting to make these processes more humane. But then he immediately loses credibility when you start dissecting, like, again, the rationale behind why he's doing it and who he's more interested in protecting. And then once we get to the Holocaust stuff, I was like, okay, he's lost me completely. But I could see how convincing he could have been to everyone, because he convinced me for about 40 minutes, you know what I mean, to get sucked into, you know, his insights on this. And so yeah, it's a shame, like you said, he just seems to be completely lacking of critical thinking and empathy, really. But it made for a really, really kind of fascinating watch, even if I didn't agree with his philosophies on life. But
yeah, it's kind of a I from the description, it was just like he's a Holocaust denier. I thought that would be like just a thing they're describing him as. I didn't know that like 2/3 of this movie was going to be about that.
Yeah.
So at first I was like, oh, okay, we're making this jump, and Errol Morris was talking about like that's very intentional because it shows just how quick somebody can go from just a person that makes electric chairs to be a fucking like associated with neo-Nazis, which is fucking scary.
Yeah, and like the guy that they interview, I mentioned this to you, Kevin and Charlie, that the British guy, David Irving, it's like that fucking guy also got involved in a Holocaust denial case in British court, or I think it might have been British court, but like they made a whole movie about that where Timothy Spall played him, called Denial, and it's like that happens after the LEUCHTER thing. It's like the fact that like he was like that stuff was like still happening, like while I mean it's just wild that happens. It's
it's also not that long ago, and was even like not that long. It was even less time when it came out. I mean, we're talking about this 20 years later. That's crazy. Like,
yeah. Bryden, initial thoughts?
Yeah, I really like this a lot. Really, like, just kind of made me feel queasy watching it the whole time and everything. As like they're like, and the fact that the movie is like not really going into like gory like giving you like gory images of like executions, or like, you know, when they're like going into the movie's like pretty reserved and showing like photos of like the Holocaust actually happening and everything. Like you see like a few photos from the camps and everything, but for the most part it's mostly just describing it. And I think like that that like just sort of the gravity of like the stuff being described, especially by the people who are like very emotionally connected to it, because like I mean it's hard not to be emotional about that thing. That like is enough to like convey the horror of it. But yeah, no, like I mean, and like the way also that he just like films the equipment with like those Robert Richardson angles and everything, where it's like all Dutch angles and making everything just look really off kilter, which I think is like that's what makes like the banality of this dude's just sort of milquetoast delivery, like the dryness of him, like just describing these ridiculous. I mean, Morris talks about how he said like the way that this guy just is describing these like grotesque things and everything, and is able to just like sort of like, yeah, this is how we did it and everything. It's like that's like kind of like the thing that's just like mystifying to him. And he said when he first tested it out, he like first tested LEUCHTER as like an interview subject. He just like, this guy talked for 4.5 hours. It was just like there's no. And he said that is like some of the strangest stuff I've ever heard. Like, and you know, and he said, given the people I've talked to, that's saying something. So like, and he said like, so that was like, that's when he knew he wanted to make a movie about this guy. I also think it's really interesting, and this is something I want to bring up when we talk about Monsters Ball and everything, but like it's interesting that this movie is about like, and about prisoners, but like there's no interviews with prisoners themselves and everything when they're just talking about it, which I think that's the movie's very pointed in that, and showing how dehumanizing this guy is and how he's not thinking about the person or the prisoner. I mean, like the fact that, I mean, this is something I alluded to at the start of the show, but like how it's so like you hear him talking, he says like, well, like why wouldn't we give them like, you know, a magazine and stuff like that to make them more comfortable when they're in their cells? It's like, okay, sure. And then he says like, but you know, and then and it's like, don't think you need to. I mean, if you're gonna go to that trouble, why would you like use the death penalty? But then also he's talking about like, you know, cleaning up like after people like when they lose control of their bodily faculties, and then it's like the cleanup of that. And he says like it's really humiliating, I think is what he says. But then he says, and you think, oh yeah, for the prisoner, and he says like, no, for the guards, like the people who have to clean up. And I'm like, I mean, it's not like I feel like that's like not quite the primary concern.
Doesn't he even say at one point they shouldn't have to risk injury or death just because an execution's taking place? And it's just like, do you not hear what you're saying?
It's ridiculous. Like, yeah. And I think it's interesting too, like just sort of the way he doesn't think about these things. Morris was asked about this, I think, in the Filmmaker magazine interview where he here, I want to make sure I get this right because I want to credit the right interviewer. Yeah, it was Filmmaker magazine where it was the blackout method where like there will just be these very disorienting like cuts to black like in the middle of the interviews. And like that was something that really I found striking. And he talked about how that was like a method he started using around the time they did that Stephen Hawking movie, A Brief History of Time. And he said, Morris said it had a kind of odd metaphorical character that to me linked with that weird on-off clicking of Stephen Hawking's own communication, the possibility of him being blacked out. But then there was something about it that I liked, information being parceled out. Here it seems to sort of capture the fragmentary way in which we know people or know anything. And I do think like that is interesting when like it is this guy just talking about these things, and like he'll like say something really horrible, and then it'll be cut to black, and then he'll just be moving on to the next point and everything. They're just like not able to sort of like put two and two together with like how what he's doing is really awful and all the implications of all that. And and I think the image of it's funny, the whole image of him at the start and the end of being in that big like electrocution room with like the like lightning going off, and it's very nightmarish and everything. And one of the interviewers asked Morris like, "Oh, what do you think the meaning of that is?" And then Morris immediately throws it back in the universe, says like, "Well, what do you think it means?" Which I think is just funny, him being playful like that. But no, and I think the fact that it's like a caged room and everything, it's like this guy LEUCHTER views himself as a martyr, and he's in a prison of his own making. He's like, "Look at what they've done to me. Look what I've lost." It's like, okay, you did it to yourself. I mean, it's. Yeah. So
which is also very funny considering that as a kid I would just watch people. You're in a room and he's in a cage, and then he'd be like, "I'm just gonna raise this thing up, and there's gonna be a ton of lightning, and it's just not gonna hit me. Isn't that cool?" But yeah, the way that's utilized in that for that opening is. It almost, and the credits too, it looks like a fucking wrestling match or something at like one point. Like,
that would kick ass.
Yeah.
Me versus Fred Leutch. Yeah.
Yeah.
TLC match. I beat his ass. Yeah. What you were talking about, Brian, is just like how long he talked to this guy, and also just how, because I was telling y'all while I was watching Tabloid, it's just Errol Morris will just, he does his thing about documentaries, and I haven't seen, it's been a while. Gates of Heaven was the last one I watched, and that was like 5-6 years ago. But
I just watched it yesterday. It's great.
Yeah, it's a good one. But like mostly his present day ones, or ones where he's talking to like controversial figures and whatnot, there's no like sensationalized editing or overtly other people talking to be like, what they just said is wrong. It's just like he just lets them talk, and they just like injure themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing I said in our chat was like he gives him enough rope to hang himself with, which I think is an apt analogy for like talking about this movie. But and what's interesting too, I did not know about this the technology that Morris uses, and I also want to give room to Charlie to talk about this, so I'll make this very quick. But, the Interrotron, where it's a machine that helps maintain direct eye contact between interviewers and their subject, where it said like Morris, I think this is from the Chicago Tribune. It said, Morris, not filling the dead spaces of an interview with questions and personal observations, the subjects are intimidated more by silence than their own thoughts, so they tend to open up to the camera in ways that they might not when face to face with the interrogator. Because it's like, gosh, what is it that he describes it as? It's a set of two cameras rigged for video image the way TV cameras are rigged for text with teleprompters. This is from documentary.org. This allows the subjects to speak to an image of him, a once removed live picture of their interviewer, and talk into the camera's lens at the same time. So bizarre. Like I guess that's just sort of that that way that people open up in that way and reveal themselves more and more. It is very very watchable.
Yeah, and also just like because like with The Thin Blue Line is pretty much like birthed modern documentaries. Like any Netflix documentary, they're just aping Errol Morris, and like documentaries do not exist nowadays how they are without The Thin Blue Line. And you would think that would make like documentaries nowadays using techniques from like 30 years ago, you would think to go back to like Errol Morris's stuff and just be like, oh yeah, it's like very rudimentary, but we've done better now. It's just like, no. This is the best. Right. It's still the standard.
Yeah.
One brief bit of trivia that Morris mentioned about Thin Blue Line. The guy that got off Randall Adams, Morris said he later tried to sue me. I was very depressed about it for some time, but then my wife told me just because he's innocent doesn't mean he can't be an asshole, which I think is a very funny quote.
His wife has incredible quotes. Also the subject of Tabloid tried to sue him like twice, and he won both times.
I believe
it's just like, you made me look like such an asshole. It's like, no, that was just you. I'm sorry.
That's you. Documentaries are always biased, but like the way that he does it, it's like, I'm giving you a platform. You can do what you want with that platform, and then hey, I'm just framing it in the way that you presented it to tell my story.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah.
Charlie, initial thoughts?
Yeah, mirroring what everyone said, I found this simultaneously engrossing and unnerving in equal measure. It's funny that we talked about how Errol Morris wishes that his films would be screened theatrically all the time, and it's sad that he's doing streaming now. And this is a movie that I wish I saw in a theater, because even from the opening few minutes, I was like just shifting in my seat just out of discomfort with everything he's saying, and I was kind of like, crap, like I don't want to be near this person, but like I know that this is and it did have me thinking, like, what kind of person gets into this line of work? As someone who's also very opposed to the death penalty, like, what kind of person has to do this job? I mean, it's a job that's been like any other job. It's like, you got to do it, and then this guy just makes me so uncomfortable, but it makes so much sense as to like it offers a portrait of a specific type of person who, while I'm sure not all death penalty people are Holocaust deniers, I'm sure that they have that mindset of like they have to talk about things, almost like even the metaphors and the allegories he uses, where it's like, you could cook this guy so much that a piece of flesh would fall off of him like a piece of chicken. And it's like, if you were talking to anybody about this on the side of the street or even at a party, you'd be like, this is like, you need to stop. Like, you know what I mean? But like, I'm sure if you do that line of work all the time, you have to kind of make light of it, like in that sort of way. I mean, as everyone does, but like, it's so, as you said, Kevin, he's such a goober at the same time. Like, and he's
like the first like 20-30 minutes before he gets into the Holocaust shit, you're just like, well, isn't this guy just strange? And then by the end of it, you're just like, I don't care, buddy.
Yeah, he reminded me of like Frank Grimes in The Simpsons. Like, he even looks like him. But yeah, and then you get like all the stuff with the death. With him building the electric chairs, and like it's clear that this guy's confident that he's fucking good at it, and he's talking about like making it as humane as possible. And Brian, like you brought up, I mean, there is that scene where it's just like, we don't want him to be in a concrete room just staring at a ceiling. Why don't you play music or give books or stuff like that? And I was wondering if this film was going to go down the ethical conundrum of the death penalty, and I'm almost glad it didn't, because
that would be its own documentary.
It would be its own documentary. It needs to be this kind of, it needs to have this focus on this specific thing. And yeah, again, when the Holocaust stuff came up, I was just like, oh god damn it, fuck you, dude. Like, when I was in high school, I've been to Europe. Outside of the Czech Republic, I actually, as part of a senior trip, we actually did go to a concentration camp, and it was absolutely like mortifying. And the ways in which he could just brush that off, I couldn't help but think about how there was, it was a field trip where we were with another school, and like even the parents who were chaperones were saying inappropriate things there, where like we were like, in a really like basically underground place, and they were just like, wow, it's like something out of Harry Potter. And even like us as a teenager were like, will you shut the fuck up? What the fuck are you doing? Like so it did make me think about like, when he's there and he's just like, there's no proof that this could have been gas. I was just like, you know what, like, what's sad is I believe that people like I mean, clearly, and this movie proves, people like you exist. How can you go to a place like this that's like one of the most horrific places in the world in human history and just have like a reaction like that? And the other thing is that I couldn't help but think about how prescient this documentary was. It's just like, like, people think like this now. QAnon people think like, and they always have. That's the other thing, is that they always have. This movie was kind of ahead of its time in that people did always think this way, but not as many people were feeling arrogant enough to talk about it openly. And it's just crazy. And then like when you get to the end and he's just like, do you think you've made any mistakes? He's like, absolutely not. I'm too good at what I do to make any kind of mistakes. And it's like, I completely believe that there are those people that are so fucking arrogant that they just don't want to believe anything outside of their comfort zone, because they've been in this, and it's a weird thing to say comfort zone, but like, he's clearly like, I am confident in my work. If I'm confident in my work and my science, why would I doubt this? And it's like, yeah, well, sometimes you can be fucking wrong, dude. Like, like and the movie does a good job of also being like, look, he can be good at one thing, but the science he did with this, it's like he diluted all of his samples, like, and it's been years. Of course, you'd be fucking lucky to find arsenic like here. So
Yeah.
it's a very it's upsetting in many ways, but it also opened my eyes to a type of person that does exist in the world that I'm not always familiar with, but know exist, and I think it is an important document by those grounds.
Yeah. It reminded me, the last third reminded me of that Vice video about Roseanne. Have y'all seen that?
I've not seen that, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, where it's just like her smoking on a balcony being like, they took everything from me. And I'm just like, shut up.
Yeah. Shut up.
Yeah. And also, Charlie, like, with the question of how this guy could get into his work, he talks about how, like, his dad worked in prisons too, right?
Yes,
Right.
he was the son of a warden, yeah.
Yeah,
Which
just like
also makes
just like
sense.
Monsters Ball.
Just like Monsters Ball, which, like,
Yeah.
if you're in that situation, I get it. And I'm sure that, like, his dad was desensitized to it past that desensitization on, but it is just, it's chilling to hear him talk about something that he's trying to be like, it's humane, when the very act of it is abhorrent, and that, you know, just talking about like someone's body just like just completely deteriorating in front of him, and just using like clinical scientific terms, or even like, yeah, as I mentioned, like, you know, just almost making weird comparisons. It's just like, I know that's like, okay, like, I know you have to like find a way to, like, we all use humor and stuff like that to cope with stuff, and like use certain comparisons to, you know, explain things to people who are not in our shoes. But like, just even the first 20 minutes of this thing, I was like, I wish I saw this in a theater, because I'm looking, like, I can feel myself trying to like look for a distraction, because it's making me so upset. Which is not the movie's fault in any way. I'm just, I think that's a testament to how to its power, frankly. So
Yeah, and it's also interesting hearing about the theater experience where Morris talked about how people would like laugh very uncomfortably at the movie. It just, I think, at Fred LEUCHTER for just like, what the fuck is this guy's deal? And then there were people who were saying, you're laughing at the Holocaust, and people were like, no, we're not laughing at that. We're laughing at Fred, his stupidity and like in dealing with it. Like, that's the where you can find the humor in the movie, and I definitely know what I mean. I mean, I bet there was laughter during that 40 cups of coffee scene where it's the doctor asking that question 3 times or whatever. Yeah.
Can you write down the number, please? Are you sure you're saying 40? Yeah.
It's weird, because it's like he is dehumanizing the whole act of well, one, the death penalty, and then, you know, but I don't really see it like that way initially, because I went into this completely blind, and so like him, the way you said, he refers to someone's body, you know, just being like, yeah, decomposed or you know, or being charred off like a piece of chicken, like you mentioned, and in the casualness with which he says those things, then you know, when I go back retrospectively and think about, you know, the other part of this, when he goes into the Holocaust denying it, that kind of makes sense, because it's like he doesn't really view the human body. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Or these people, like, it's like he's so detached from humanity that, you know, and it's not in a malicious way, which is actually worse, because then he doesn't have any kind of reaction to it.
Yeah.
You know, that, yeah, the denying, you know, the cruelty and brutality that happened to all these people, you know, then makes sense when he doesn't even see the people that are being, you know, systematically murdered by the government as, you know, so it's a very weird portrait. And like you said, like, thinking about how far back this movie was, I also, my takeaway was that it was very eye-opening. It's not surprising, but like you said, I think what was probably shocking at the time was just the casualness with which he speaks about these things, which now, as it runs rampant, nothing surprises me now. People's thoughts and opinions and stuff. I feel like people vomit words all the time now, and it's like, at this point, I don't even know. You know, I'm almost desensitized to it, even if, and which is also a bad thing, but, you know, it's less shocking today.
yeah. Do you think he's a 9/11 truther?
I mean,
Listen.
I put some money on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, I went to the ground zero and I didn't see any airplane fuel. It's like, sir.
Yeah. And it's just the fucking arrogance of this guy drove me insane. And that's the point. Of course it's the point. It's just, like, dude, just, like, I don't know, like, I mean, I'm about to turn 32, but it's like, don't you want to grow as a human being? Do you, like, what's the point of living if you can't just fucking adapt and change your ways and grow just a little bit? Like, which is exactly why we're so frustrated by waves hands everywhere for those who can't see me doing it, you know? But
yeah, and it's funny too about like the sort of detachment that we're talking about too, and how we sort of, it sounds, I mean, Charlie, you were saying like, how did this guy get married too? The fact that he got a wife, it's like, but if you hear her talk, I mean, first, like, she sounds,
it's so depressing.
She sounds as, first, she has like the driest, flattest effect, like him and everything, but she says like, you know, when she met him, he was like a tipper, like he was like a customer at the diner where she worked, and he was like a good tipper. And then like it was like, oh, what does he do? And it was like someone said like, oh, he kills people. And then she was like, no, what does he really do? And it's like, and it's like he made things that kill people, which sounds like the line in Collateral. It's like, no, I shot him. The bullets in the fall killed him.
The fall killed him.
Yeah, and then the fact that I know that we haven't really gotten into the plot, but you find out that like for their quote unquote honeymoon, he went to the concentration camp and left her in the car for hours. She was like, yeah, I brought some books.
She wasn't comfortable.
Oh, of course she didn't want to go there, but why the fuck did he even bring her there? Like, do something nice for your fucking life. Like, and she was like, I just read books for hours, like, whatever. Like, you know, clearly depressed.
I like crosswords. Really like crossword puzzles. And then,
yeah.
Why did she divorce him too? Like, was that the thing that pushed her over the edge, or was it like?
I don't know. It's just it's a line playing over him, you know, losing all of his stuff, and it's just like, yeah, I just didn't want to be around, so I told him, and he hemmed and hawed for a week, and then he just moved out. And if I never saw him again, that'd be okay.
That'd be
It's
okay.
just like, okay, yeah. There's not. I mean, with documentaries, I mean, we've been talking about, you know, like the first third is just him talking about electric chairs and whatnot, but where it takes the turn is that this guy Ernest Zundel is being tried in Canada for spreading false news by publishing and sending material denying the Holocaust overseas, and they reach out to him, to Fred, because he's like, you know, the only person that would know about gas chambers and stuff like that. So he's asked by the defense to travel to Poland, to Auschwitz, to investigate whether they had been operating gas chambers for executions at the camp. And the thing that's struck me most about the scene, where it's all him in Auschwitz, is there's a part where one of the gas chambers, the only way to get in is like through this hole, and he's the entire time he's just like, oh my god, wouldn't it be like so scary if there was like feral animals in there? It's just like, sir, hundreds of thousands of people have died in here, and you're worried about a fox.
Yeah, and that's also really interesting when like you're seeing the footage and it is just like the videotape for the longest time, and then you hear the historian, the actual respected historian, say like, all right, stop, rewind. It's like him wresting the proper POV from the movie, which is really fascinating. I like that. I mean, just like the rage that guy has, where he's like, it is so disrespectful that this guy did this. I can't believe it. Like, he's just barely containing it.
And it also made me think of like the way certain right-wing people will be like, no, I'm not an anti-Semite. I have tons of Jewish friends. I've lost Jewish friends because of this, but I don't think I deserve. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm just talking about logic and science. And it's like, dude, you can't have it both ways. That's just so awful. Like, and it did remind me of like, you know, just the way people talk about that. You know, I'm not racist, but like that type of bullshit. Like, it's just, it's like, dude, you can't, and you're so stubborn. And it just, it infuriated me in the ways in which the documentary is meant to provoke me. So definitely one that's gonna stick with me.
Yeah.
Fred is 79 years old and still kicking.
Wow.
I'm surprised he's not big on like what's Trump's social network? I forget.
Parlay.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Pollard.
No, he's got to be a Trump supporter. There's no way.
But do you think he knows how to use a computer? I mean, I don't know. Like, that's maybe wrong of me to ask.
He knows how to build electric chairs. I mean, like, the guy's not technologically like stupid. He's just philosophically and stupid. And I also thought, if this guy was in my fucking sociology class, like, he would be the one where if whenever he'd raise his hand, the whole class would be like, ugh, and just scoot away from him. Like,
yeah, you'd be like, Professor, when you said that, I was just curious. I thought that was funny, and you're just like, we're not getting out of here on time. That's great.
Allow me to play the devil's
he would be that guy.
I mean, I was about to say, like, would he be the kind of guy, like, who says, like, allow me to be the devil's advocate for a moment. But he does, like, say, like, but he does say in the movie, like, now, if I were in charge of this operation, why would I do this? If I were in charge of this, I would, like, murder, suicide the whole operation so no one would be able to trace it back to me. I'm like, why are you talking, like, with, like, such close identification in this hypothetical scenario? It's
I know,
so creepy.
the stuff where he was like, why didn't they just use guns? It was like, they did. There are more than one. Like, I'm sorry, sir, but do you know that the Holocaust is, like, there were multiple ways in which the genocide can happen? Like, are you fucking stupid?
It was like, they used gas chambers, but this was a labor camp. Why would they want to kill people if they could use them for labor? It's just like, sir.
Sir!
God.
Yeah, it's so revolting. But, like, yeah, this was very uncomfortable viewing, but, like, undeniably riveting, I gotta say. Yeah, it's...
LaRon, any final thoughts?
Well, I'm surprised I didn't see it. Hadn't heard of it beforehand. It made for a really interesting pairing for the next one we're going to talk about. An interesting insight, an interesting avenue into that conversation. So, I mean, happy to have seen it. I think, as everyone has said, it is riveting. It's really compelling. And going in blind was really good for me because, again, I didn't have any insight into what I was getting ready to watch. And so that made it, the unpacking of it and the new information and then the contradiction of information, as everything went on, that much more, fascinating as it unfolded. So happy to have watched it. Probably won't watch it again, but would likely recommend it to somebody else.
Yeah.
You're not going to have Mr. Death themed birthday parties anytime soon?
Oh, man. It's not as fun as Scream themed parties. So,
hell yeah.
Is that, I think Errol Morris actually gets criticized of that. Maybe I'm wrong, but that he allows and we kind of touched upon this, but that he allows his subjects to trip over each other and then he puts it in the movie and it's like, that's manipulation. It's like, no, I don't think so. Like, I think that...
Nah.
People trip over each other all the time. I trip over certain contradictions about superfluous things, like, all the time. And then I think to myself, shit, like, I just am a total hypocrite about, like something that doesn't even matter. But, like, when it comes to serious stuff like this, I think it's important to analyze a person like this and be like, this is the danger of, thinking in this type of way.
Yeah.
And that's important. Like, it's not meant to be... And as I mentioned earlier, all documentaries are biased, but I feel like this one's trying to be as
as hands off.
His biases work for the message that is not being spoon fed to you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's good to have a point of view in a documentary. Like, that's, I feel like, a necessary thing. If he didn't have a point of view, that would be dubious.
That would be yeah. And it would also be dishonest because you have to have a point of view in order to make a documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if Errol Morris is going to be the type of documentarian to be like, camera in front of a person, go, they're going to trip over themselves, they're going to contradict themselves, and he's the type of person to not just edit around that type of thing.
Yeah.
Just that's the person, warts and all.
And one other thing, too, that I did not know about this is, I did not know about Morris, is, like, talking about how it's hard not to be emotional about dealing with this history and everything. It said that, like, it sounds like in this interview with the Jewish Journal, it says Morris had been preoccupied with the show since learning of the death of his relatives in the camps, which is, like, so this is clearly personal to him, I think, in many ways. So, like, the bias, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which at the time he said, like, which every director does this, is like, my new movie is my best movie, but he seemed to have definitely felt like this was the most involved he's been while making a documentary. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at KevBonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at JDoyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CTNash91. Once again, thank you for listening.